Okay, so today's lecture that I will give to you is titled Digital Lives, Real Consequences, and it's the effects of excessive screen time uh, and social media on learning and behavior. So this topic is timely, but what makes it challenging is that we don't have enough research to make a stance, but I have tried to put together all the research material I can get from, out there. And also I have included partly some of the research that we have done here at the University of Uvascular. So I hope that at the end of the lecture, we will be able to say something about scrolling and the internet. So in today's lecture, we are going to look at the digital environment today and try to develop an understanding of, screen time, what it is, and the trends and types of screen time. We are also looking at social media and the learner's mind. What is research telling us on screen time, and what are the interaction or the interplay between screen time, cognitive skills, and executive functions? At least we will look at what research findings are saying, or currently done research is saying. And then we will touch a little bit on the classroom realities and see how teachers can, maybe identify some of the manifestations in learning and behavior of the children who are exposed to too much of this screen time. And we see what role the teacher can play in mitigating, these trends, and perhaps just briefly on some practical strategies for schools and homes. So, like I said earlier, I hope this, because it's only 35 minutes, so I will kind of just touch on a little bit on each and every aspect and open the floor for further discussions, after this session and also in the future. So if there is time and possibility, then we can have more lectures on this topic and more discussions around this topic. So when we are looking at like the issue of the digital environment today, we know that everything is becoming increasingly digital. We no longer have that option of saying that, or either or, digital or, but it's the reality or the realistic situation that we have to start thinking how to healthily engage in the digital environment today. And we see that statistics are telling us that there is an increase in use of the screen time and device usage, and also device ownership, so that even children as young as 2 to 4 years have their own digital device. And if you look at the trends, you find that we have these, like looking at the internet. So this is more global statistics, and these are mostly approximations, and they are based on, for example, advertising audience data from those respective platforms. So they are not, they are just approximates, but they give us some rough idea what kind of situation we are dealing with. If we look at the most popular, like YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok, we are seeing globally that under 18 years, children, 250 million, are already engaging in this internet space. And if you look at this trend, we also see that amongst the young people, Facebook is kind of, the Facebook usage has gone down a bit. And I was talking to some youngsters who said that Facebook is for old people. So they look at Facebook as some, engagement for maybe people in our age group or older, and so on. And I also broke this down a little bit by age group, just to, give us some idea what kind of platforms the children are engaging in. And so I think that this is important for us as adults, whether we are teachers or even parents. We need to go to those sites and find out a little bit more about what is going on these sites, and not to kind of feign ignorance and just leave it up to the youngsters. So I feel that our responsibilities as researchers, parents, or educators would be to learn a little bit more about these platforms and what actually goes on there. So I will go a little bit now to looking at the screen time, and we are saying that there are different types of screen time exposures. So passive is if you are just watching videos, not doing anything. Interactive is if you're playing games or video chatting. And then we have the educational, the e-learning platforms or digital reading environment. And then you kind of have a recreational use type of screen exposure, which I could not really get concretely some information whether people are classifying this type of social media usage as passive or active or interactive. But I think the most important point here is to know that if you are engaging even on like Facebook or Instagram and you are looking at educational material, then it is a little bit more educational. But if the content is just free time, short form, texting and that kind of thing, then I would say that I would divide them more into educational and non-educational, usage of the platforms. Of course, some kind of data that's also really missing is understanding that what would be the effect of screen time exposure, even if you were on an educational platform. So should we limit also the amount of screen time exposure we have, even if people are using it for educational like needs? So that's one question for our breakout room, like some thoughts. I couldn't really find any data out there that's telling us or that has researched the effects of screen time exposure for educational platforms, for example. So food for thought. What was a little bit alarming for me was to learn that even children below 2 years of age are exposed to approximately 45 minutes of screen time per day. And the exposure to screen time is actually starting before their first birthday. And if you look at this study, you see that it is a study done more than 15 years ago. So the trend now is rising and alarming. I know that here in Finland, many parents have started to buy for their children different type of like mobile devices. So just analog style of phones where you don't really engage on the internet on the phone and you are only using this phone for communication with your parents or so. So I think that when we look at what is happening and these trends, and even one study like in 2023 showing that there are infants who are already exposed to more than 3 hours of screen time daily, I think it is time to really think about this and to think that what are we really doing? Because again, we have limited research that is allowing us to really understand what this early exposure is doing to the brain and cognitive development of our children. In the later slides, I will talk a little bit about some recent findings and what they are saying about this. And then if you look at another thing that I find alarming, I think we all do, is the screen time trends when you look at the children from 0 to 18 years. And if you look mostly at the teenagers, the teenage period is the most vulnerable period for our children. Of course, from early age, you are vulnerable for neurodevelopment and so on. But our teenagers, because it is more difficult for us as parents to regulate them, they become even more vulnerable, and they face, developmental milestones, changes in themselves that make them more vulnerable to rely heavily on the screen and social media and gaming and so on. So if you think about these statistics here, it seems that on average, a teenager is spending half of their time on the net. Because if you are 7 to 9 hours per day and it's saying you are heavily using social media or playing video games, and in one day you need to be in school, you need to do your homework and so on. So how much time is left for the other things that the teenager is doing? And I would shudder to think that how much sleep are these teenagers even getting, for example? And then we go to the question, and you can say, okay, why? I mean, if the teenagers are there and they are, limiting it, or we try to control it, or we don't know so much. So why does screen time exposure matter? We know that the digital exposure is influencing the cognitive, emotional, and social development, and the other way around. So it's influencing, and also the cognitive, emotional, and social development influences our interaction on the net. And we'll see a little bit later on about this. And some studies have shown that 38% of teens feel that, and this is a study, I think these are studies from the US or Northern America, which 38% of teens feel they are spending too much time on their smartphones. So meaning, although they feel that they seem to not be able to regulate their usage. And we see that parental concern grows, especially when the children are reaching like the peak of their teenage. So it becomes really hard to control the children's screen time. So if we, think about, understanding like the social media, understanding cognitive, emotional, and social effects on social media, we see that, or because I think that if we look at our mobile devices, whatever they are, or the computer, if that's what you are using, I would predict that if we didn't have internet, we would be less on our mobile devices. I think so. If we were just doing like tasks that we need to do and communicating with one another, the addiction wouldn't be as much as it is now when it comes to having the internet connection. And I think that these problems, even, or challenges, if I may call them that, they are also affecting us as adults, even the adults who didn't grow up in a digital era. I sometimes have thought that I'm always with my phone and somehow struggling even a little bit to leave it aside and not be tempted to know what's happening in the social media or in the news and so on and so forth. But we have seen that this is affecting self-esteem. And for example, girls tend to be affected, especially with the body image. And then when you are having online socializing, you kind of are limited in your real world social skills because those are not so needed in the online space. Some years back, my son informed that when they would walk to school, because the school was near the home, and when they were walking to school, they would walk in silence because everyone was on their phone. So that was a little bit, for me, really shocking that we tend to very quickly go to our online space versus, engaging socially. And before, or some people have said that maybe it's only the children, but I have seen this happening even in the adult space. And of course, when it comes to the social media, the internet, we also have the issues of cyberbullying and online safety concerns, which arise and should be addressed. And we see that like the constant exposure. So for example, when you're on the Instagram, and now all kind of AI apps where we can smoothen our skin, for example, make ourselves look thinner, and all those kind of artificial sculpting of ourselves. And when we are constantly exposed and looking at other people on the net, we start to develop unrealistic standards about, for example, our looks, or unrealistic standards about our lives, because we are really exposed to people's one-time moment, and we are rarely exposed to their everyday life and every moment of their life. And then when we are dependent on the likes and comments, and we start to associate that with self-worth. If you have more likes and comments, if you have more followers. So it's of course on the other side providing job opportunities for online influencing, but still there is that risk that if you are not having as much likes and so on, you might develop or an idea that you have a lower self value. And of course, some studies have also shown that increase in the risk of body dissatisfaction. In Kenya, we have had, I don't know how it is. I've not seen that trend so much here in Finland. I don't know how it is in Italy. But for example, in Kenya, the tendency to go, for girls especially, to go for plastic surgery and change their bodily appearances through surgery has increased maybe by 70%. And I think that this has been exacerbated by the internet. And also you find that the algorithms start to control our lives because they amplify content. And so if I'm looking at content more about people's perfect lives or people's perfect images, then the algorithms tend to give me more of that. And this promotes like some kind of too much peer comparison and negative effects on our self-image. And one thing I want to mention is that some of my slides will be a little bit crowded, but just bear with me because they are crowded because I put there these references. I try to put them there so that when you are later maybe answering questions or come back to look at these slides, you have the references for each topic that you can use or read on further. And of course, we see the online socialization versus real world social skills. For example, if you are just playing video games, how are you socializing? But if you are talking to each other, you can get much more feedback on person. If you are with your child interacting, you can give much more feedback if they have either positive or negative behavior. You can give it, instantly there. But in the social media, content, our socialization skills are kind of developing slower, or they are not, the expectation is really not as high. And you find that some studies are showing that the digital communication, it reduces empathy. When something is online, you see that in cyberbullying, which I will touch on a little bit later. You see the tendency that it becomes really nasty because it's impersonal. It's much more difficult to really be that nasty to somebody face to face, and that's related to the empathy building. And then over-reliance on messaging and, writing means that sometimes the conflicts, when they arise, cannot be resolved because it takes a long time. If I tell you something and you misunderstand what I'm saying in face-to-face interaction, I can very quickly there correct what I'm trying to say. But online, you will be waiting for me to type, and it will take time. And maybe by that time you have responded to me, said something negative. So also conflicts can easily escalate. And some children have also shown delayed development in verbal and non-verbal social cues because these are kind of different when you are online. And just as I talked about, the online exposure, and this is something that we need to take more seriously, is exposing our children especially to a lot more cyberbullying. And it is anonymous, as I said, so it can take a really nasty turn, and the emotional effects, the anxiety, depression, school avoidance, and in the worst case scenario, suicidal ideation develops in our children. So I think that as teachers and as parents, we need to, and not only waiting till the children report to us, oh, I'm being bullied, but kind of be more proactive in really finding out how our children are engaging when online, especially when it comes to safety concerns. And again, just to say something, it was a little bit challenging to find like a lot of research and data on this, because I guess this topic is still in its infancy, especially when it comes to the research. And so we really do not still know fully what this really means when it comes to brain development and screen exposure in children. But we know that, for example, too much early exposure may disrupt the development of self-regulation, attention, and language. And we know that interactive educational screen content in moderation is good. So you might develop some vocabulary, but if you are using it passively, especially in the before years, it is linked to delayed language development, because I guess there is a reduced interaction, face-to-face interaction, and real-time feedback from your parent, especially when it comes to the language formulation. And of course, we know that evening screen usage, the blue light emitting devices also interfere with our sleep. And we know that sleep is necessary for memory development and consolidation and brain maturation. So we have also seen that high screen time, when the children are using too much screen time, they developed reduced attention span. I don't know, I think it was last year, or I don't remember, when there was a big discussion here in Finland that the children only want short videos. They don't have the patience to even watch a 20-minute video, because they are used to those short videos, or I don't know what they are called, on TikTok, where for 1 minute videos, you see something and then you scroll to the next and to the next. So even children who otherwise don't have problems with their attention start to have the reduced attention span. And of course, like I said earlier, of course, naturally also the development of poor emotional regulation, because in today's world, you don't really learn to inhibit. Your phone is there. You are doing something else. You can easily reach out to your phone. Even for us adults, check Facebook, what is happening, X, what is happening, leave it, go back to what you're doing. And in children, this is even more critical, because these are the years they need to develop these skills, or the resilient skills that will help them to cope later on in life. And so, again, it's more like a repetition, different studies showing us the same thing: lower, emotional regulation, attention, memory, but also excessive screen time. So more than 2 hours a day is associated with lower academic performance. And it's for many reasons: poor sleep, too much concentration on the wrong thing, so that attention is directed to other things other than the academic tasks, and so on and so forth. So in one study of the work that we have been doing quite a little bit on this online reading, so online reading comprehension. So maybe I would say looking for information on the net and or online engagement. And in one of the projects, I don't have time to go deeply into these projects that we have done, but if somebody is interested, I'm happy to provide more information. I am also happy to go more in depth into these specific studies if people are interested. So in this study, we found that the gender of the children and how much they used the internet during their free time predicted or determined their self-efficacy and attitudes towards online reading comprehension. So why am I giving this example? So what I'm trying to say here with this study is that some level of internet usage is necessary. We cannot really block our children from using the internet because this is the reality, and we continue to use digital material and we continue to use the internet to get information. That's how the world is now and will be, I think, in the future. So it is good for children to use some internet at times so that they develop those internet related skills, but it has to be limited, because if we don't also expose our children to some level of internet usage, then when they go there, they will be flying blind, and that will not yield to any good results either. And as educators, we need to also pay attention to the fact that the gender of our children might play a role in how they're interacting, and factor these differences in our classroom, environments. We also have another study, the ESIC project, which was also really going in depth into studying these internet reading skills. Also, if people are interested, we can give more lectures on this. And in this study, it showed that clearly you can see here that girls and boys have different approaches when they are doing online information seeking on the internet. So just to explain a little bit, in this study for the online reading comprehension, so it was looking for material or information on the net. These are the profiles, so locating, confirming, questioning the information, identifying the main ideas, synthesizing and communicating the information that they found were the profiles that were identified. And here it also showed us that girls and boys are different. So perhaps when we are teaching digital, online reading comprehension in the classroom, it's good to also pay attention to these issues. And Kiara, when am I supposed to finish?
Sorry. The course ends at 7,
Yeah.
but take your time.
Yeah, I try, yes, I try to take only 5 to maximum 10 minutes to just say what I have to. And here, one interesting thing that we found was that when there were attentional problems, so when the children had attentional problems, surprisingly, girls performed worse than the boys in this online reading comprehension. So this is just food for thought and knowledge for you to think about. Of course, it would be good for additional studies to be done to confirm whether this is really the case with bigger data. And the same story here. So if you don't have reading difficulties, then of course you are a top performer when it comes to, even educational tasks on the net compared to whether you have reading difficulties, attentional difficulties, and also if you are in the comorbid group. So this is a paper that is now in preparation, and hopefully at some point it will be possible to give more comprehensive data. So, why isn't this moving? I'm sorry, something with my computer. Is it changing for you?
No.
No, it's not changing.
What should change?
The slide should change.
No.
It's not changing. I don't know why. Okay, let me.
Click your arrow on.
Yeah, sorry, I just share it.
Arrow on the screen and then use the arrow, the mouse on the screen and then arrows.
Yeah, I tried to do that. So let me just go back again. I don't. Okay. share. No, not screen one. I think it was, but now it's somewhere else. I'm so sorry about these problems. I don't know why they are
Yeah.
there.
Now, yeah.
We see now your.
Okay, so I will just, because it's more or less the same, go to here. I hope that this is now, something is not, this is also not working for some reason. I don't know what has happened.
It's
Okay.
changing.
Did it change?
Yeah. Now put it on the.
Okay.
You have to make it now the biggest.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes, technology.
Now it's not in. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, good. Okay. So now when we think as teachers, so I have to unfortunately speed through this a little bit so you can expound on this more in your discussions. And we see that in the classroom, children have reduced attention span and they have a difficulty to stay on the same task until it is finished. So they are switching here and there and are generally disruptive. So this means that you need to check this, and you might hear even people saying that, oh, we have more children with attentional problems, but this is also the internet and overusage on the internet has led to this. So these children may not necessarily be children who have attentional difficulties otherwise. And then, of course, because of this, you will also have increased behavioral challenges in the classroom. Without adult moderation, there can be, aggression, impulsivity, lack of real-time feedback, then on their emotion, on their behavior, and you may find that children are reacting strongly to minor provocation. So as a teacher, I guess one has to pay more attention to this, an increase in our workload as teachers, but this is the reality we are facing, unfortunately. And then you find the dependence on instant gratification. And that's something many parents have reported as a trend in the current generation, if I may call them that. They are so used to getting instant likes, instant comments, instant feedback on the net. So you may find that they want this and they get frustrated very easily, even with tasks in the class, or very easily frustrated if you are not giving as much feedback or some positive reinforcement as they would like. So they have difficulties to persist in delayed gratification, waiting to receive the feedback on after completion of the task, for example. So it's good that as teachers, we check this. We check signs of digital fatigue, sleep deprivation. We really have to actively more check this, not obsessively, but just be aware as teachers that it's good to check this in our children. And of course, we don't know, and it's impossible to know everything, but we can see signs if there is some cyberbullying, because it is not necessarily the face-to-face bullying which you can see obviously in your classroom. And I think that one key fact is that we need to engage in digital literacy. These need to become subjects and topics taught in the school. Critical thinking about your social media, emotion regulation, empathy, and your digital citizenship, especially for our children, need to really be taught now as subjects in the classroom, and not barely glossed over and assuming that somehow people will navigate, by. And again, this cannot be done if there is no proper partnership between the parents and caregivers. So the teachers have to engage more, discuss more openly with parents about screen habits, get parents to commit to, at least providing or creating digital boundaries at home. And also the parents themselves could get more, knowledge about the digital space. And of course, we should model what we need to do. And I will just skip through this. Was just putting together what we are currently doing in the Andy project. There is information available on the internet, but if somebody is interested to know more what we are doing in this digital transformation for neurodiversity project, then you can contact me. And again, I think Pavo said something about what's happening in the Center of Excellence. And there I have circled the digital because I think this is going to become an increasing part of our learning and everyday life as time goes by. And it's, for me, if the digital screen time can be avoided, we don't need to be there, especially for children who are below 5 years. It's not necessary. They don't miss anything if they are not on the net. We as parents feel better because we can control our children and keep them attentive to that, but it's not necessary. I think that we as parents can also learn to be more tolerant of the demands that are needed for the children. And of course, even when the children are older, we don't need to be on the net if it's not necessary. And it's also important to talk with the parents and give them information, for example, from the WHO organization on how much screen time, is recommended for the children. And you can see their recommendations there saying that children under 1 year should have no screen time. And then, I think that, are we going now to the breakout room or what is the plan? Because I have one more slide just on conclusions, but I think that maybe I can say it here and then we come back to this reflection and discussion. And it's more or less just consolidating the key takeaways that excessive screen time is associated with challenges in cognitive, emotional, and behavioral development of our children. And it can impact their self-esteem and emotion, behavior, social behavior. It is also showing up in the classroom and affecting their learning. And teachers can play a vital role in identifying and helping the children and parents to regulate, their usage. And a balanced digital approach and include into your teaching activities that don't necessarily involve the internet. So the goal is not to eliminate screen use, but to guide learners towards purposeful and age-appropriate and emotionally safe technology engagement. So I can say here, thank you, and take us back to our breakout.